English counseling. Well, I have the section, so I'm quite so busy as I used to.
Well,
So are you here during the day or night?
3 evenings a week.
Are you on news stuff?
That's what I want to talk to Sue about, what that is. I have to find out what that is, because I think I would be able to.
Oh, no, we haven't been on that. What do we get? Well, I just paid
Is there a
my...
form?
Yeah, you sign it and then they just automatically take it out. Service, like $3.
Oh, that's, because
Well, you know what, I should get one of those, like, I just when? Just like 2 weeks ago?
yeah, but now we got your check.
That's what I'm saying, but
Yeah, be sure to do it because it saves us money.
Yeah.
And we don't have to worry about sending you out to remind you.
you know, now we're getting old and I can't remember anything. Because then the only other thing that's separate, and again, I could understand someone, but I wrote 2 separate drafts, one for taxes.
Oh, SUAA action, yeah,
So,
you're right.
so even if I was there,
Yeah, because the SUAA action is different. Because that's,
well, I was sort of confused. At first I was going to write it all in one job, and then I was like, no, I'm going to write the
SUAA action is different. But next time, you sign up.
I will. But I'm going to get it out.
All right. Yeah, give me the form.
Yeah, and fill it out and just sign and give it back. And we'll
Write down your email.
Oh, absolutely.
And here's why.
Okay.
My wife and I have a kid. Well, it's kind of the south end, towards the south end. So it's not on the water. It's kind of away from the water, but it's near.
You know, they have the prints that doctors say. It's right next to the summit.
Yeah, I know where the summit is, sure.
But not too far from the area.
Okay, I know exactly what it is.
Or do you go down there?
We're down
Or
there
you
this
just rent
summer.
it out, or what do you do?
Well, we try to rent it out, although we're thinking about selling it as well.
Oh, really?
But maybe while you're down there,
Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry.
sign and date it. That gives us the authority to have service deducted to $3.
because I keep forgetting to send
Why did I send the check? Did I write it?
But most people do. Yeah. You go and fill out.
I will do that. Yeah, and I'll give it to Sue.
Before you leave.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to take your seats, we'll begin our program in just a minute or two, making sure all of the technical issues are taken care of before we get started. Again, I will ask you to please silence any electrical, technological devices you may have with you, like cell phones. while we're waiting for the technical aspects to be cleared, I'd like to recognize some of our guests today. I'd like to recognize Michelle Thompson, who is the Secretary of the and Cappy Lang, who is the new Director of Governmental Affairs for the university. And from our campus, we have Vice Chancellor Mark Donovan. In the 21st century, I'm beginning to wonder, are we the slaves of technology, or is it the other way around? I'm not sure. All systems go. Thank you. Christopher Kennedy was appointed to the Board of Trustees of the University of Illinois in September 2009. He was elected chairman by his fellow trustees at the first meeting, re-elected in January of 2010, and re-elected again in January of 2011. Mr. Kennedy recently retired as president of Merchandise Mart Properties. I remember years ago my father worked in the Merchandise Mart for many, many years on the 8th floor. After serving as president for 10 years, Merchandise Mart Properties owns a dozen Mart-related buildings and operates some 85 important trade shows throughout North America and Europe, with over 10,000 exhibiting companies and over 1 million visitors annually, all of which has given him familiarity with leading far-flung operations like those at the University of Illinois. Mr. Kennedy's roles as a member of the Dean's Advisory Board at Kellogg Business School and as trustee of the Catholic Theological Union, both regarded as #1 schools of their kind in the country, as well as being a member of the Association of Governing Boards, have given him tremendous experience in the governance of educational institutions. He serves on the board of 2 public companies and serves as treasurer or chairman at a number of other non-governmental organizations, all of which give him additional experience and insight into the governance issues at the university. At the time of his first appointment, the university was reeling from a high-profile admissions scandal. Since then, enormous change has taken place. An active partnership with the faculty has been created, the confidence of the alumni and major donors has been restored, and great progress is being made in terms of recruiting new talent to lead the university. We are happy to have Mr. Kennedy here with us today. Please welcome Christopher G. Kennedy.
Your father was probably in the menswear business.
You're right.
Yeah, on the 8th floor of Manhattan.
Used to be called Manhattan Industries.
Okay. You can tell how well I look that I embraced all of the traditions of the menswear. They had a lot to work with there when I first arrived. So. Now, I know that everybody in this room has an enormous stake in the university, and for many of you that interest was developed through years of service, which was firmly rooted in the greatness of the university, which is its tremendous tradition. For others, that stake is grounded in the great hopes for the university's future and your continued involvement with it. I thought it would be helpful for me to share with you my interest in the university and give you a sense of what has been accomplished over the last 2 years. I hope this is the start of an ongoing dialogue, and I'd be happy to continue it as long as there's interest from all of you in an appropriate setting to do it. I look forward to working with all of you to protect the future of the university. To paraphrase General MacArthur, I'm aware that university professors, administrators, and staff never retire. They just continue to lead the way. I'm glad that the University of Illinois has people like Don Chambers in the Department of Physiology and Biophysics, and Bill Kaplan, who continues to involve himself in the Department of Performing Arts, and Eric Gisellen, who continues his work in the Department of Chemistry. The university is lucky to still count on Lauren Whitaker and his nationally recognized expertise in surgical education, as well as Brenda Russell and her research efforts, which contributed to findings which earned a $12 million award last year from the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. We're grateful for the continued dedication and support of UIC United, and they give us one more reason to be proud of the University of Illinois. The work that you all have provided to the university and the communities which it serves reminds us that change in Illinois only occurs when lots of different people from across the state in a range of industries with diverse backgrounds and varied interests come together to find common ground and to work side by side. Like the state itself, the university is a communal enterprise. In part, we recognize that we who are in Illinois are all tied to one another like an oversized American family. In my mind, there is nothing better to strive for than that, to be a part of a larger family, to be a part of something bigger than ourselves, and ultimately to serve that larger community with the unique gifts that each of us has been given. Today, I want to speak about the university of our state and the state of our university. I don't think you need to have gone to the University of Illinois to care about its future, just as I don't think you need to live in Illinois to care about the future of the state. Whether you work on one of our campuses or not, if you love this country, you must care about the university and about our state. History teaches us that what happens to Illinois will happen to the rest of the country. If we get stronger, the country will get stronger. If we get weaker, so goes the nation. The state is weaker now than it has ever been before, with rising taxes, including a nearly 4% annual growth rate, declining taxable assets, and a gaping hole in the budget, including the highest per capita budget deficit of any state in the country. In the year 2000, Illinois ranked 28th in terms of state and local tax burden, as shown on the bottom left of this chart. 2011, we project will have the 4th highest per capita tax burden in the nation. This chart shows the 5 post-war recessions, and along the bottom of the chart is the number of months it took for white-collar jobs to return to the pre-recession levels. The thick red line, which stretches deep and long at the bottom of the graph, Is the 2007 to 2009 recession the source of most of the problems in our state? Our job growth is not bouncing back as it has after prior recessions. Already, 30 months into this one, job levels have barely started to climb back to their pre-recession levels. Many of those jobs have been replaced, but just not in Illinois. The jobs, for the most part, have been consolidated elsewhere. This chart shows the jobs consolidating from the light-colored states and moving to the dark-colored states. Consolidation has probably been the single most important economic trend for the last 2 decades. In fact, there are entire publications now dedicated solely to covering the news of companies buying other companies. The largest grocery store in the United States is today now Walmart. Half of the entire United States fast food industry is controlled by just 6 companies. Google owns nearly 70% of the online search market. 50% of all men's suits are now sold through a single retailer, Men's Warehouse. Consolidation is affecting retail, it's affecting manufacturing, and it's affecting large-scale corporate mergers and acquisitions as well. In fact, many of the enormous corporations which used to dominate the Illinois business scene have now been bought by much larger institutions headquartered in places like London, Charlotte, and New York. Just as consolidation has impacted individual industries, it has also been impacting entire cities as well. What is disturbing for Illinois is the fact that the amount of economic activity controlled by individual cities has been consolidating to megacities. Enormous megacities have developed, and Illinois' most important city, Chicago, is not keeping pace with their growth. Residents of the Chicago metro area make up about 74% of Illinois' total population and generate nearly 80% of the state's economic output. 50 years ago, Chicago was one of the 10 largest cities in the world. Today, we're struggling to stay in the top 30. Before the start of the last recession, we were ranked 115th on the list of the fastest growing large metropolitan economies in the world. As we exit the recession, we've dropped down to 127th. Of the 50 wealthiest communities in the United States, Illinois is no longer home to a single one. If a company is going to allocate assets to a particular geographic market, we need to be cognizant that those companies may allocate their assets somewhere else, someplace with more people, greater economic activity, and higher population growth rates. This future consolidation would impact the inequality of our competitive situation by further strengthening competitive cities and weakening our own. We need to keep pace with competitive cities, or eventually we will lose out in the race for consolidating corporations, new business development, and the important white-collar job growth which follows them. Increased economic development is critical to our competitive situation with other cities, other states, and other regions. Just as importantly, economic activity is necessary to increase our tax base, which is critical to funding government and thereby providing basic social services like our police force and our fire protection. Economic development is also critical to providing long-term, dependable funding for a robust arts environment. A growing tax base is necessary to fund great kindergarten through 12th grade education and the funding of almost every social service, from healthcare to housing to hunger. In short, economic development is crucial to the long-term sustainability of our entire region. Economic development is wholly dependent on job creation. More companies have moved to Illinois to open businesses at the Merchandise Mart Center than at any other location in the state. I know what it takes to get companies to move here and to get them to expand once they arrive. I know what a challenge it can be. I know how much easier it is to grow a company here than it is to import one. I think there's a special role that public research universities play in the economy of our state, and therefore in the communities which that economy is meant to support. That special role is the creation of new knowledge, which leads to the development of new products, which ultimately leads to new jobs. Perhaps the only perpetual job creation activity that a government can engage in is funding academic research institutions in higher education like the University of Illinois. I know more about the University of Illinois than I do about the other major research universities like Northwestern or the U of C. Like Northwestern, the U of C, the University of Illinois is not simply another college or another form of higher education. It is different because it is an academic research institution. Each year, the University of Illinois earns about $800 million from the federal government and other sources in research funding. Northwestern received about $485 million last year, and the University of Chicago got about $395 million. The University of Illinois Chicago campus, UIC, attracted $250 million, which is more than all of the other research conducted at all of the other public universities combined. That number has skyrocketed over the last year into really impressive numbers. Nothing is more important to the future of Illinois, our citizens and communities, the health of the economy of the state, our quality of life, and the competitive positioning of our region on the national and global stage than are these academic research institutions. Like the other research powerhouses, the University of Illinois has the potential to be a perpetual job creation machine. I know how that dynamic works. I have seen it up close. Before I moved to Illinois, I lived in Boston, and I saw firsthand how research universities can drive the rebirth of an economy. Boston, as an economic center, has died multiple times, and yet, again and again, it has risen from those ashes as a formidable economic center by unleashing the transformative power of great research institutions. Over and over again, Boston died and was reborn, first as a shipping capital, then as a banking capital, then Route 128 emerged as the center of the country's high-tech boom with companies like Wang Computers and DEC. Then that sector died in Boston, and now the city is reemerging as a leader in biotechnology and nanotechnology, and the economy there remains strong. This constant economic rebirth was driven by the research institutions in the region, which have led the way in every economic recovery. This was achievable, in part, because the leadership of those great research institutions stayed close to the political and business leadership. Those political leaders brought home federal government research grants, which funded basic research, which supported applied research, which created new ideas, around which were built new companies and employed new people who paid taxes, which funded local schools and created a whole new supply of highly educated students capable of propelling the cycle again and again. The university research operations in the Boston region created new jobs over and over and over. I went to college in Boston and graduated from BC in 1986. Everyone in Boston at the time knew of Father Monin, who ran BC, and like the rest of the leaders there, had an incredibly high profile. They also knew Derek Bach, who was the president of Harvard at the time. The president of the Massachusetts State Senate, Bill Bulger, left that job to become head of the University of Massachusetts. There was great interplay between the did I mention John Silver? I skipped that one. The man who was president of Boston University, John Silver, ran for governor of Massachusetts and came close to winning. There was great interplay between the university presidents, the political officials, and the business leadership. The university presidents encouraged business leaders to support elected officials like Senator John Kerry and Ted Kennedy and Tip O'Neill, and to become fully engaged in the political process. John Kerry and Teddy and Tip went to Washington to bring home federal government research grants for places like Harvard and BC and MIT and Brandeis and other research institutions. Those schools invested in basic research, and that research left off applied research, and the trustees and other business leaders invested in those ideas, which created small companies that employed people who paid taxes, which funded better schools, and that virtuous cycle continued again and again. MIT alumni alone have founded over 25,000 companies. Improving funding for academic research institutions is dependent on a close working relationship between political, business, and academic leadership and the great research institutions themselves. That dynamic has not always existed in a great way in Illinois. Most business leaders in Illinois could not name all of the presidents of Northwestern, or the University of Chicago, or DePaul, the largest Catholic university in the United States, or SIU, or the Illinois Institute of Technology, or Roosevelt University, or Illinois State, or the University of Illinois. Even if we can name them, we probably haven't received the call or opened an invitation from them to join them in building a relationship with Dick Durbin or Mark Kirk. These university leaders are not pushing the business leaders to become engaged with federal officials or to try to improve funding for the research institutions in our state. The result has been devastating to our capacity to align our resources to garner a larger share of the federal government research pie. That we rank something like 45th out of 50 states in terms of what we send to the federal government in taxes and what they send back to our state. In fact, we get about 78 cents back for every dollar we send to the federal government. Protecting the best interests of our state by looking after the University of Illinois is critical to our future, and it is how I have spent much of my volunteer time over the last 2 years. In the last 24 months or so since I was elected chairman of the board of the university, we have been busy, and I thought I'd try to give you a little update on some of our work. First, we came together as a board, as individuals from lots of different backgrounds. We acknowledge each other's individuality and unique strengths, but we are committed to representing not ourselves, but the greater interests of the university. We are melded into a unified force which can speak with a single voice drawn together by a greater purpose. I was one of the first new trustees appointed to the board by Governor Quinn. My nomination was made public 5 or 6 days before everyone else's, and just 10 days before our first board meeting, a mere 8 days before the agenda needed to be published to meet the guidelines under state law. During those first few days, I met with then President Joe White, and I met with the university's general counsel, Tom Barrows, and I met with our outside counsel, Zach Farden, and then I met with the secretary of the board, Michelle Thompson, with then President White and the legal team again and again and again, and then with the CFO, Walter Knorr, and together we reworked the agenda for the first board meeting. We tried to focus on the important issues facing the university, and we zeroed in on 2 areas. First, the comprehensive presentation of the university's finances, and organizing a response to the public problems related to the admissions scandal, which were still looming at the time. When the board met, when the board meeting began a few days later, our first vote as a newly constituted board was on an agenda item called Special Item 9A. In an historic vote, we abolished the Category I admissions program and returned the university to its strong traditions of integrity and openness in the admissions process. The admissions issue was, of course, the most visible challenge facing the university in September of 2009, but like many great obstacles, it represented just the tip of the iceberg, and there were plenty of other challenges lurking beneath the surface. The admissions issues were in many ways not as daunting as were the critical issues related to long-term finance. Some of you here today are from the business community or have exposure there. Others study economic and government policy, and after 9 or 10 years or so of living under Sarbanes-Oxley, you'd be surprised that the University of Illinois, with a $4.5 billion budget, was not operating with a fully functioning audit committee or with a committee charged with overseeing corporate governance that met regularly. The university did have 14 separate standing committees. It is unclear to me as to whether or not they were designed to provide leadership and vision, or rather to extend the tentacles of certain board members into the day-to-day operations of the university. These committees were often made up of the entire board. By constituting the committees in this fashion with full membership, it makes it nearly impossible to create a quorum. Without a quorum, the committees did not need to report their meetings. Committee chairs or co-chairs could meet privately 2 or 3 at a time, or perhaps even secretly, and discuss contracts, approve new hires, and speak about allocating university resources without the imposing conditions of public oversight. From a review of previous agendas, it was clear that there were often more items that dealt with awarding contracts for renovations of some minor room rather than dealing with the more critical issues like developing a response to the competitive threat from private universities luring away our great researchers, or leveraging our newfound national political strength in Illinois to attract a greater share of the federal research pie, or creating an overarching vision to attract to the campuses the finest minds from throughout the country and around the world. We reorganized the board structure to eliminate those 14 committees and reduce them down to 4, each of which now meets regularly and in public session. With a streamlined system in place, we began addressing additional lingering issues too. Our most important goal was finding a new permanent leader to fill the presidency of the University of Illinois. We realized that a great leader was going to be responsible only if they had the ability to respond. In advance of our search, the board took a number of steps to strengthen the presidency. We've increased the threshold of contracts that need board approval, thereby increasing the authority of the administration to enter into such contracts and spend money to keep the trustees out of the day-to-day operations and to create greater accountability to the administration. We've increased the president's authority, and we've changed the title to President and Chief Executive to clearly signal our respect for the position. We've clarified reporting relationships where the president reports to the board and everyone else reports to the president. We've strengthened the presidency with additional staff, like a head of human resources and an enrollment management executive, to ensure that we have the best talent coming into the university. And we've created a position for a new executive to aid the campus's efforts in pursuing federal research grants as well. As the search for a new president began, we needed to be respectful of the faculty and their desire to be led by a proven educator with strong academic credentials and a record of accomplishment in research. We needed a president who could work with the state legislature and with the federal government to secure additional government funding. We needed a new chief executive who understood the complexities of an academic medical center and who could combine the public mission of the university with the realities of funding an ongoing capital program necessary to attract great minds from around the country to first-class labs. We needed someone who could ignite the fires of the imagination among students and who would be seen as their champion too. We wanted someone who understood the importance of winning athletic teams and who appreciated that in Illinois we would rather win than lose, but we would rather lose than cheat. We don't want to cheat on the field, and we don't want to cheat our scholar athletes out of a full and complete education. More importantly, we wanted someone who knew that teaching and coaching were as similar as learning and winning. At the University of Illinois, we want strong teachers and great coaches and winning teams and the best colleges. One candidate quickly rose to the top of an incredibly impressive list of peers. Mike Hogan has held nearly every management and executive position in academia, rising steadily through the ranks from professor to dean to executive dean of arts and sciences at Ohio State to provost at Iowa and ultimately to the presidency of the University of Connecticut. We are delighted that Mike Hogan agreed to join the university as our 18th president in July of 2010, and in his first 15 months or so, he has done a tremendous job. The critical issues facing the university are not related to admissions or governance, which are fundamentally a distraction, but the fact of major challenges around the issue of finance. The government in Illinois, as you all know, has a big budget problem. The government is taking in less in taxes than it is paying out in operating costs. The fact that the state of Illinois' budget hole amounts to a huge portion of our general fund expenditures is a great challenge, but we don't want our state budget problem to become a state economic problem. A budget problem can become an economic problem when the state simply cannot provide for the school. This dynamic is playing out across the country and around the world. In Italy, when they tried to cut funding for the education system, the people rioted in the streets. I was in Spain 2 weeks ago, and the city center was shut down by a peaceful protest of teachers marching to oppose further cuts in government funding for education. In America, our cities are not being shut down. There are not riots in the street, but the cuts are happening nonetheless. In California, they've cut spending for the California State University system by $650 million. The rest in the most recent state budget, and the 112 campus community college system lost $400 million. In Illinois, we haven't cut our funding to the universities in a large way, but we haven't been paying the universities either. This chart of outstanding state receivables indicates that as of last December, the state owed us $450 million in cash. We don't want to starve the only proven sustainable economic engine that exists, which is a highly functioning academic research institution which is home to inventors of new ideas and new businesses. At the University of Illinois, we have a long-term issue related to the steady decline in state support for the university. In the last 9 years, since 2002, we've lost over $100 million in annual revenue from the state. At the same time, inflation has continued its relentless force, devastating our purchasing power. The university has continued to expand and to grow to fulfill our land grant mission, adding new students every year, all of which demand greater resources. If you take all of these factors together at once, the decline in state support, the ravishing effect of inflation, and the increase in the number of students, you get to a number where, on an inflation-adjusted basis, state support per student has declined 37% in the last 10 years. In 1970, the state matched $12 in subsidy for every dollar in student paid tuition. Today, the state provides 80 cents for every dollar a student pays in tuition. All of this occurred at a time when the state was in terrible financial straits, and it was only natural for the government to look at cutting our funding, particularly when that scandal broke out. I think any responsible state official needed to be cautious about giving additional revenue to an organization whose corporate governance was in disarray and whose use of public funds had been called into question. I think the fact that the board moved quickly and dealt with the admissions issue, made progress on the governance questions, responded to the MICVA Commission recommendations, strengthened the presidency, reinstated great leadership, and restored a solid financial foundation allowed both the governor and the leadership to see the progress that we were made and to rally with us. In terms of the next steps we need to take over the next few months, most important is to continue our progress to restaff the upper echelons of the university. In every academic institution in the United States, history shows us that a strong presidency results in strong chancellors, that strong chancellors result in strong deans, that strong deans result in stronger professors, which together combine to attract a stronger class. The university had 16 of its top administrative positions staffed by administrators serving on an interim basis. We needed to fill each and every one of these positions with permanent leaders of top flight quality, like we did with Mike Hogan and Joe Garcia. The research for a permanent chancellor for the Springfield campus recently concluded with the hiring of Susan Cook. Susan will lead the Springfield campus to greater growth and to new levels of achievement. At the Urbana campus, the search committee for a new chancellor, led by the thoughtful Professor Doug Beck, led us to the recruitment of Phyllis Wise. Phyllis is in a great position to lead this exciting and superb campus that ranks among the top campuses in the world. We need to continue to strengthen our efforts to build relationships with both the state and the federal government. Last year, we recruited our Director of Government Affairs, Cappy Lang, and brought in new directors to support her effort, including Deshauna Forney. We teamed with the Alumni Association, which has 300,000 alumni living in Illinois, which created Illinois Connections, which, when it's fully functioning, should become the most potent lobbying force in the state. Last March, we finalized and approved the recruitment of a new leader for our new Washington office, Jonathan Pyatt, who will assist us in our work towards strengthening the university's relationship with our nation's capital. We've modified an existing position as the Vice President of Research for the entire university, who will assist the campus leaders with their efforts to attract additional funding from federal agencies like the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation. I know Larry Shook is highly regarded by those who know him, particularly on the Urbana campus, and I know that he has been meeting with many of the faculty leadership to get their input as he defines his role. With these changes made, we can now focus on the future. Hopefully, we will have at least 6 years to make hay while the sun shines on Illinois. We are in a very special time because we have representatives of Illinois serving as the President of the United States, his Chief of Staff, the second most powerful United States Senator in Dick Durbin, the Republican Party leader in Mark Kirk, and one of the most powerful Congresswomen in Jan Schakowsky. We have an incredibly strong congressional delegation representing each of the University of Illinois campuses: Danny Davis in Chicago, Tim Johnson in Urbana, Don Mazzullo representing Rockford, Aaron Schock in Peoria, and John Shimkus in Springfield. And of course, the executive branch is staffed by the sons and daughters of Illinois, including Ray LaHood and the Secretary of Transportation, as Secretary of Transportation, and Arnie Duncan as the Secretary of Education. Hopefully, we can work with their teams to improve the economic viability of our region by increasing our research funding at the university. Research institutions thrive in part because the ideas that can be harvested for economic purposes are rooted in the fertile soil of an intellectual environment supported by a broader paradigm for the humanities. This prepares future leadership by forming their thoughts around economy and political leadership, civic participation, and improves their capacity to wrestle with the diversity of ideas and the complexity which life always challenges us all with. There's something special about academic research institutions, and they have a special mantle of leadership and a certain burden to help all other forms of higher education. We don't want people who are taught the joys of education in a community college and who continue their lifelong learning to be forced to move out of state to a place like Florida when they retire. We don't want the skilled workers who earn a certificate in medical technology or in construction management at a trade school to move to New York or California just to find a job. We don't want our highly skilled graduates ready to be the knowledge workers of the future forced to pursue their careers only with companies headquartered in London, Charlotte, or New York. Our state's research institutions have a special role in creating not just jobs and companies, but the potential to spawn entire industries which can contribute to the economic rebirth of our state and our region. We must all work together. We are so well poised in Illinois with city colleges in Columbia, DePaul, Governor State, IIT, Illinois State, Loyola, Northwestern, Roosevelt, SIU, the University of Chicago, UIC, and Wheaton. In Chicago, we have the largest population of college kids in any city in America. And now, by working together with the other institutions, we can have the best outcomes of any state in the nation. We are the biggest, we ought to be the best. In my mind, our response to the challenges we face started with a single issue, which is a commitment to be the best at what we do. If students think we are the best at what we do, more of them will want to be accepted at the university, and so more of them will apply. If the university diploma is a symbol of being associated with the best university of its kind, then it will become a bargaining chip for higher wages and greater corporate advancement. If the University of Illinois is the best of its kind, it will receive a greater share of state funding, and our leaders in Washington will fight their colleagues for a greater share of the federal pie. The university will thrive, and it will ultimately serve the best interests of the state and of its people. Being the best at what we do has become our #1 job, and we cannot obtain it with cheap wages or with false honor. It needs to be rooted in being the best in the country, the best in the nation, in every aspect of our being. The fact that we're building the world's fastest computer in Urbana in conjunction with the National Science Foundation, the fact that we were able to recruit away from the University of Chicago, itself one of the great private universities in our entire country. Skip Garcia is the Vice Chancellor of Research, along with a $20 million portfolio of research, are testament to the fact that we can continue to lead the world. More than anything else, we want to retain in Illinois the minds of great researchers and brilliant students. These are our collective children, and we want to keep them close to home. These are the young people who we want to recruit to our offices. These are the young people who we want leading our companies in the future. These are the ones who will reinvent our society over and over again with new ideas that create new companies, which hire new employees, who pay taxes, which support schools, which educate a whole new generation ready to begin that cycle again. Public academic research institutions are the greatest renewable resource this country has ever had. Let's protect the one that we have in Illinois. We can beat back the forces of consolidation. We can engage in economic development. We can create jobs. We can give our children careers, and we can protect the future of our state. I hope I can count on all of you and your support as we strengthen the University of Illinois. I speak for the entire board when I say we intend to earn that support. We intend to earn your respect. We intend to preserve the pride that everyone should have in our state's flagship university. And in some small but important way, we hope this will build on the pride which we should all have in the state of Illinois. Thank you all very much.
I know you feel as I do a great deal of confidence that the goals outlined by Mr. Kennedy are easily achievable with him at the helm. He'll be happy to take a few questions. Who would say, all right, Dick Johnson, please.
Well, I'm sort of blown away by this presentation. Thank you very much. You probably know a little bit about the State University Annuitants Association, and we spend a lot of time talking about pensions and how we treat our people who have served many years at the university and have had a large part in growing it and so forth. And I think this what we're trying to do to deal with the tremendous problems in the state are very helpful to the university. The university has not in the past taken great interest, I think, in this because the political problems in the state have put universities in the position of having to respond to the question, do you want the money now or do you want it in the future? And the decision made for many years has been that the choice was to take the money now to deal with the current problems. And that is very understandable. But I think we also have to be aware of the enormous resources that the people who have served for many years bring to the state as well. So I hope you agree.
I agree. I agree. I mean, I think that there are certainly elements of pension reform generally that are not helpful to the university. And if we're going to, part of the competitive advantage that the university has always enjoyed was an ability to attract great minds to jobs at the university, either as researchers, professors, or senior staff, who were promised great pensions. And to the degree that the state doesn't fund those pensions or diminishes those pensions, either the university is going to be at a long-term disadvantage relative to where we were, or the university is going to have to step in and fund the difference. And those are two ugly choices for the university. And I think we're very clear on the impact of pension reform in the university.
It's Professor Bardak.
You project the university as a large single body in a sense, but recognize its components. I work with a number of other institutions of higher education, and continually, when they refer to the University of Illinois, they're only thinking of Champaign-Urbana. I think it's very important here that you're also talking to a UIC contingent, and that we have got to do a much better job of selling UIC, first of all in the Chicago County area, and neighboring counties, and then beyond.
I mean, I'd say that the greatness which is present on this campus is incredible. And if you look at the numbers, particularly the research numbers, which is a great barometer of many things, UIC is closing in on Northwestern and U of C, and may have the capacity to surpass them. And our goal would be to get to $1 billion in funded research across the entire university. A lot of that growth will come out of Chicago, and I think it hasn't been well marketed, but I believe that before you market something, before you promote it, you've got to make it great. And I think we've sort of got our sequence correct in the sense that we're doing great things at UIC, and we can begin to tell that story now.
But I think we have to make other faculty and other institutions aware that when they say U of I, they don't only mean Champaign-Urbana.
I agree. And there are lots of ways that we are trying to force cooperation between the incredible research that occurs here, particularly around the medical school and the computational power down in Urbana, and then the computational power that's present in Argonne and other places to create greater partnerships with those institutions. I'd say the Chicago Biomedical Consortium, which has forced cooperation between this institution, Northwestern, U of C, has opened up the researchers' understanding at those institutions of what is occurring here. And the more of those cooperative ventures that we can engage in, the more quickly our reputation will spread by word of mouth, which is certainly more powerful than a great website or any other form of promotion.
That's Professor Anderson.
Right. When I was on campus, one of the things that I was involved with was the Chancellor's Committee on the Status of Blacks. I chaired that committee. And the affirmative action question has been a troubling question for a very long time. It appears to me that the Gerber decision of the Supreme Court, the court may want to take up that decision sometime next year. The decision which allowed affirmative action race to be included among the criteria evaluating students. Is there a sense that you have either for our own institution or across the larger spectrum of institutions across the country, how the court may want to move with that Gerber decision?
I couldn't predict the actions of the Supreme Court, but to guess that it will get worse before it gets better. I do think there are things that we can do in our own house that will ultimately be more important than what the Supreme Court does. So if you look at the enrollment from African American males coming out of the Chicago public school system at either of these the major campuses in Chicago or down in Urbana, it's de minimis. It's probably less than 100 males coming out of CPS enrolling in the first year in September of this year. That's ridiculous. Yeah. So the question is why is that occurring? And one thing that we know is that we're admitting more than we ever have, but we're enrolling fewer. So Mike Hogan, who's been around a lot of different institutions, went and hired a couple of consultants, people who run recruiting, admissions, enrollment at the University of Texas System and University of Connecticut. And they came in and spoke with a number of us about that very issue. So I asked them, I said, why are we failing in this area? We're pounding on it and we're not getting anywhere. And they said, oh, that's obvious. It's like easy to fix. Oh, okay, how do you do that? He said, well, the board has traditionally set tuition in June of the year. Because generally speaking, the board doesn't like to introduce new tuition ideas while the students are on campus, because they go crazy and you get your administration occupied. So you wait till they move on in May and set it at the June board meeting. Plus, traditionally, the state legislature was done by May, and they weren't in session in June. You don't want to set your tuition while the legislature's in session, because they may think when you raise tuition by $50 million, we can take $50 million out of your allocation. So we've always waited till June to do all of that. He said, well, the problem with that is that if you set the tuition in June, you can't create a financial aid package till late June or early July, even 4th of July holidays in there. So you're going out to these kids, and most of them need financial aid, and all of them have earned it. And they're getting financial aid from every other competitive institution. We're creating that financial aid package in the middle of July. It's hitting their homes in the end of July. The guy said to me, listen, do you have children? I said, yes. Are they college age? Yes. Well, did they know where they were going to go to school by July of the year? I said, yes, they knew. When months earlier. When did they commit? I don't know, you had to commit by the spring. He said, 100% of college kids in America have to commit by May 1st. You're not setting your tuition package till June. You're not creating financial aid till July. Those kids can't take the bet that you're going to come through for them as the counselor has suggested, but not in contract. All you have to do is move the whole process up 90 days, and you'll get those kids to come here because they want to stay close to home, or you have other competitive advantages. But that kind of basic technical change of how we conduct ourselves, I believe, will ultimately be more powerful than what the Supreme Court or others do. It's a long-winded. I'll answer short.
Marcia Borders.
Marcia Borders, yeah. What kind of relationships are you pursuing with the business community? I know they seem to be very much in the picture, and I know earlier on in the university that was done, but we haven't heard much about that lately. So I'd like to know what you are specifically doing at this point in time.
Well, I think by tweaking the position of research and putting Larry Shook in that role, we now have somebody who is in a position to take greater advantage of the research that's coming in and the other platforms that exist to commercialize that research or expose it to the business community as an investment idea. So I think you're seeing a strengthening of the research park down in Urbana, a great deal of focus on that. There's hundreds of companies that have been sparked as part of that network. And we need to replicate that here in Chicago. We have a nearly dormant organization around the medical, the Illinois Medical District that doesn't have an active board of directors, is not doing anything that could replicate the activity that we see down in Urbana. And I think you'll see us try to play a larger leadership role in igniting that activity and trying to create greater linkages using that mechanism as a way to bring focused interest by the business community in investing in in ideas that are commercializable.
One more question.
Thank you, Chairman Kennedy. With respect to globalization, where is the university going, particularly the Chicago campus, in terms of internationalization? We're hearing more international students coming abroad, branch campuses, collaborative research among many of our competitors, and where's the university going in that regard?
Where's the university going
in internationalization efforts?
You mean with our international? How are we dealing with
international enrollments?
I think first of all we try to measure ourselves and benchmark ourselves against international competitors. So that's probably not something that we've ever done before, and we're rolling out a new dashboard program, which we'll start to see at the next meeting, and then for the January retreat for the board of directors. But we're starting to see, how does UIC, how are each of the campuses competing on an international basis? And I think just by measuring ourselves against other international competitors, we'll begin to broaden our focus and sharpen it as we look to international opportunities. There are about 50,000 University of Illinois graduates or alumni living in China. Many of them went through the Urbana campus, but we have great linkage there, and those kids, they want to come to the United States, and they're particularly interested in coming to the United States and being part of an urban environment. Chicago has a lot of sex appeal to folks from other countries, and I think that we can strengthen our ability to recruit those folks here. I think one of the basic issues of diversity is why does it matter? And a fundamental issue is that we live in a multicultural democracy, and there are other multicultural democracies. But in the last year, maybe 18 months, the Germans have abandoned. The head of Germany has said that no longer works for Germany. We're not going to be a multicultural democracy anymore. We're going to be a German democracy. The British have said the same thing. The Prime Minister said it's not going to work here. We need to be a British democracy. The French have said the same thing. Our great allies in the experiment of a multicultural democracy have abandoned it. We're the last ones standing. We need to teach people how to live in that environment. And they can learn that in a college environment where they deal with people who are different themselves, either different culturally in the same country or from other countries. And the more exposure we can give those young people, the greater hope we can have for them that when they grow up and assume positions of responsibility, they'll have a capacity to live in a multicultural democracy and not abandon that, which would be devastating.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Michelle? Just take a quick
wireless or are you actually wired in?
After about 0 to